Good evening, everyone. If you get a seat, I think we'll start. I'm so glad you could join us tonight. I'm Diana Morris, and I'm the director of the Open Society Institute here in Baltimore. We've actually been here for 20 years. This is our big 20th anniversary, and so we're happy that you're here as part of the different things we're doing this year to really mark that anniversary. Actually, this series, talking about race, we've been doing for 9 years. This is a series that we thought was really very important to have, to create a space where we could have some of the very difficult conversations about racism, structural racism. And I think our hope is that if we get a sense of that structural racism, that together we can begin the process of trying to dismantle it. Some of you may not be familiar with the Open Society Institute, so I'll just tell you very quickly. We are a foundation, but we're a really hands-on foundation. So one of the tools we use is grant making, but we also do a lot of our own advocacy and our own communications work and our own education work. We are here really focusing on the results of racist and sometimes currently racist policies that have really meant that for many of our residents here, there really is such little mobility. And we feel that the most important thing we can do is to try to remove some of those barriers that are holding people in place so they can't realize their full potential. So that means that we're working on changing policies and practices and often beliefs. A lot of that work is really focused on Baltimore City, but to get it done, we often have to work at the state level. So we're doing both simultaneously. The areas we've decided to focus on, given what we think are some of the root causes of the problems we have here in Baltimore, is over-incarceration, so this huge reach that the criminal juvenile justice systems have, often in ways that make absolutely no sense at all. We also are focusing on making sure that people who need it have easy access to good quality drug addiction treatment, and that there's a very low threshold to getting that. And then the third area is education, and we don't focus so much on curriculum. We really focus on the kinds of support that young people need so that they can really have safety in schools, peace and calm, get the kind of supports they need so they really can focus on their studies. And finally, the fourth area, and it's one that you might know yourself, is the Community Fellowships Program. We now have 190 fellows all throughout the city, and in many different ways are revitalizing the community. It's a really extraordinary group, so stay tuned for the next 10. We are going to be having certain events this year to really try to mark and note some of the impact that we've had so far. And I think that's really important, not just to sort of wave our own flag, but also to let lots of people know that there's many very exciting things happening in Baltimore City, and we can all build on them. And in fact, Baltimore can be an example for many, many other cities across the country. The next event we're going to have is actually on Wednesday, June 13th. Mark your calendars. That's at Center Stage. It's going to be with Vanita Gupta, and you may remember her name. She was the head of the Civil Rights Division at the Department of Justice during the whole period of the Department of Justice investigation of the police department and the consent decree. And now she is actually with the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. We have actually a postcard here, and I hope you'll take one on your way out. This actually does have tickets, unlike our other events, but I hope that you'll consider coming and supporting us and also having the great opportunity to hear Vanita. Tonight, we're really happy to be working with a co-sponsor, and that's Baltimore Ceasefire. It's really been tremendously inspiring to watch Baltimore Ceasefire movement grow in Baltimore over the past year. It's drawing attention to the many people who are working in communities across the city to prevent violence, and really calling on everyone to join in and do their share of the work. Now, tonight's conversation is going to focus largely on victims of police violence and also on increasing police accountability. But we certainly join in with Baltimore Ceasefire in mourning all the victims of violence in Baltimore City. And we know that we all have to work together to address the root causes of that violence. The revelations during the recent gun trace task force trial, and before that, the Department of Justice investigation of the police, reinforce what communities in Baltimore have known for a long time, that the Baltimore Police Department is in desperate need of deep, systemic reform so that they can effectively protect and serve the residents of Baltimore. Increasing police accountability has been a key focus of the Open Society's criminal and juvenile justice program since its inception. We've worked to bring in community voices into the Department of Justice investigation, and everyone agrees that the resulting consent decree actually requires more community engagement than any other consent decree in the country. And we're also, at the moment, continuing to support the Civilian Oversight Task Force, which is a really important group required by the consent decree to actually figure out what kind of civilian review board we should have here in Baltimore to hold the police accountable. And we're also involved in other aspects to make sure that the consent decree really makes a difference, really has teeth, really is implemented. In a minute, we'll turn things over to our moderator, Bakari Kitwana, who's going to be with us to moderate it, but he is an old friend of Open Societies. He's a journalist, and he's an activist, and he's an author of 4 books, including The Hip-Hop Generation and Hip-Hop Activism in the Obama Era. He actually joined us, we just figured out, it was 8 years ago, for another Talking About Race event, and that was when we all viewed The New Muslim Cool, which we were saying maybe it was a film ahead of its time and maybe we should bring it back. So that might be a good idea. And by the way, we are always open to all of your ideas for speakers and topics that we should be addressing in this series. On our panel tonight, we're honored to have Samaria Rice, Gwen Carr, Marion Gray Hopkins, and Tawanda Jones, 4 women who have each turned extraordinary loss into extraordinary advocacy. Bakari will introduce each of the panelists in more depth, but first I want to welcome Erica Bridgeford, who's part of the visionary group that's helped to create Baltimore Ceasefire here. This weekend, I think many of you know, is a Baltimore Ceasefire weekend, and here's the card that tells you some particulars. And I hope that you will look at some of the Baltimore Ceasefire affiliated activities and think about how you can participate in some of them. So Erica's going to talk a little bit about a Baltimore Ceasefire and help frame tonight's discussion. But after the panel, she's going to come back and she's going to guide those of us who are able to stay into small group discussions around the tables you saw in the lobby. And there will we really be able to discuss how we can turn some of the ideas and sentiments we hear tonight into concrete action. So I hope that you'll be able to join us there so we can move our city forward. Thanks again very much for being here.
Hi, everybody. So at 12:01 tonight, Baltimore Ceasefire, Baltimore Peace Challenge weekend begins. Ceasefire Peace Challenge weekends happen every quarter in February, May, August, and November. It's usually the first weekend of the month, but in May, it's Mother's Day weekend on purpose so that we can uplift and honor parents who've lost children to any kind of violence, with a specific focus on Saturday for fathers, because we know that fathers have pain around losing children to violence. They just aren't often as vocal as moms and sisters are, right? And so we want Saturday to really be events that affirm dads who've lost children. Every Ceasefire and Peace Challenge weekend is focused on people not being violent, and so checking all of your responses to conflict. So if you say, well, I'm not somebody who's likely to get into a fight anyway, but you may be likely to be petty. You may be likely to share a negative meme on social media. You may be likely to snap at somebody in traffic, right? So can you purposefully be peaceful for 72 hours to raise the vibration of this city? Because if we're all doing it at the same time, it changes the atmosphere of where we live, right? Also, it is a call to celebrate life. And so there are 48 life-affirming events scheduled to happen. And so there are only 6 of us squad members, the organizers of the ceasefire movement, and we have 15 newly trained ambassadors. And so 21 people can't by themselves organize 48 events all over the city, but you can. Right? And that's what happens. It is a grassroots movement where people in the city decide, what does life affirming mean to me? What do I want to do to celebrate life in this city? And then people plan those events and they let us know, and we put it on the calendar, and they network and get the support that they need through coming to ceasefire meetings and being involved in our Community Connect on social media. And so in various ways, people are really collaborating in the true spirit of what collaboration actually looks like, the time that it really takes. The outreach for ceasefire weekends is about getting out into communities and asking people what resources do they need, what's going on in their lives. We can't talk about violence and murder without really acknowledging that it's a public health issue. Right? And hurt people is not just a cute thing you put on a bumper sticker or a t-shirt. It's a real reality that people are hurting. And so we talk with one another about what resources do you need and help one another get what we need. And then, by the way, did you know a ceasefire is coming? And you can go to all of these 48 life-affirming events all over the city. Right? So we're doing all of that stuff. And that's why it's 3 months in between each ceasefire. So we can really do the work of helping one another heal so that we don't feel the need to be violent to one another. And so please go to, first of all, change your profile picture. I mean, it's kind of not funny, but I'm laughing. Change your profile picture, right? It's an easy thing to do. Collective consciousness matters. Collective imagery matters. We see how much negative imagery impacts us. We see how much seeing black bodies fall all around us, that imagery that we keep being shown, we see how that impacts us and what that says to us about who we are as a society. And so this kind of collective imagery really matters. So if that's all you do, now if your picture is of your mom because it's Mother's Day weekend, then that's your excuse. You can keep your profile picture. But if it's not your mother, change your profile picture to the ceasefire logo. It's a very easy thing to do. It's temporary. You can change it back on Monday. And then please show up at these events. People have worked very hard to plan really family-oriented, life-affirming events all over the city. So please show up somewhere, show up a few places. I can only go to 9 because y'all don't love me enough to give me money to clone me yet. So, I got to only go to 9. But please show up all over the city and just spread love. And if you have not, you should be telling 3 new people every day that the ceasefire is coming. The next one is in August. It's going to be huge and big and stupid because it's the 1-year anniversary. And so that'll be exciting. You don't even have to get excited with me because I got enough excitement for everybody. But it's going to be big. So thank you so very much. And please don't give up on Baltimore.
How's everybody doing tonight? All right. Glad y'all weathered the downpour and came on out here. I want to try to just jump right in here because we don't have a lot of time. And I know y'all came to chop it up with the mothers. So I'm going to just make a short opening remark and then just kind of jump right into the conversation. I want to first just kind of talk about how this came about. And really, it was this was Sabrina Fulton's idea. Me and Sabrina have been working around the country for the last few years doing forums like this. And one of the things she said to me was, I want to do this with other mothers. I want the other mothers to also be out there talking with people about their story and really mobilizing people to action. And so Sabrina and Tracy they have the new book out May 1st on Trayvon. They also had the film that just came out a couple of weeks ago on the same title that Jay-Z executive produced, the docuseries. And so one of the things that she said at the release for that film was that she doesn't want these conversations, these books, this film to just stop with the film. You know, one of the things that happened when Trayvon was killed, it mobilized people all over this country. It mobilized young people. This continued through 2014, through 2015, through 2016. We got a little bit derailed with this Trump business, but you know, our hope with this forum is to really get the energy back up. The forces against changing this story are deeply entrenched. They're deeply entrenched. They're heavily funded by taxpayers' dollars. And we have to do everything within our power to keep fighting, because this is the right fight. And we have to stay on it. So you all know the mothers, and I think I'm just going to jump into the conversation. I want a couple of shout outs to some folks that I would need to mention here before I jump in here. I want to shout out David Miller, because I know he's one of your grantees, right? And David has been a long time friend and supporter of mine. And when I've done other events in Baltimore, he's always got my back and guiding me through the, make sure I don't dip into them potholes. And I want to shout out Davon Love and and Reverend Heber Brown. And so those brothers supported rap sessions. I want to say this must have been 20, it might have been the 20, I think it was 2012 or 2013. We did a big thing at Bethel, and they came out. We did breakout sessions similar to what we're doing tonight. But I think we focused around the election that year. And so when the things jumped off here after the police killing of Freddie Gray, and folks around the country were asking me, you know, who should we be who should we be checking for in Baltimore? Those brothers' names were the first names that come out of my mouth. And they put out this amazing video that I thought was so important for this type of work, right when, you know, people would come in, you know, during this day, people were going to different cities and trying to turn up, and they put out this video telling folks, you know, you need to check in with local people. You know, don't come to somebody else's city and just try to, you know, think you're about to hold it down because people are not organized. And I thought it was one of the most important, it's like 3 minutes. So if you ever get a chance to look at it, take a look at it. I talk about it and I show it all over the country. Another thing I want to point out is a video that, I'm trying to remember the sister's name. After Oscar Grant was killed, Dereka Blackman was working with a group of activists out in San Francisco. They put out a video. If you get an opportunity to watch this, she breaks down in like 3 minutes all the things that they did to mobilize and to respond to a police killing. And I think it's one of the best kind of blueprints for folks who are just kind of trying to get into this. So I want to mention that. I also want to, again, shout out Reverend Pastor, now Bishop. I've known this brother for over 20 years. He keeps Frank Reed. He didn't make it tonight, but his wife is here, Marla Reed. So what's up to the bishop's wife? Okay. and that is Maya Rockymore, another longtime supporter of my work, and Lisa Fager Bediako. I know y'all know Maya Rockymore, right? All right. So I've been knowing and working with Maya since she was a right after she came out of graduate school. So those are my people. I just want to shout out David Mays, the founder of the Source Magazine, is in the house also. He's in the back row. So shout him out. DC born and raised. And then, okay, let me just jump right in. And one of the great things that happened as we put this together was somebody had the foresight and the urgency to make sure we had Baltimore represented on the panel. So, so let's start with Baltimore. And Sister Tawanda, if you can talk to us about what's been happening here in the city. In particular, one of the things I would like you to really talk some about is just what is your reaction to the consent decree? And, you know, is it something that that you're finding to be effective, meaningful, useful, or not?
Okay. Thank y'all for having me. And I just want to start off by saying I don't even know where to start at with all the stuff that's happening in Baltimore. I really don't know where to begin, but I'm just going to kind of jump in there. And since the brutal death of my brother who was murdered in 2013, so for now, 250 weeks, me and my family and supporters have been fighting tirelessly for accountability because we didn't want what happened to my brother to happen to Freddie Gray or none of the victims of police brutality or murder. And so, and since then, with actively being like on the ground, out in the street, getting us old state's attorney out of office, because that's very important. If you're not going to prosecute killer cops, there's no reason for you to be in office. If you're not going to be fair and transparent around the whole entire board. You know, so, and with that being said, and as far as the consent decree, I feel as though in some way it's effective, but in some way it's not, because at the end of the day, we're still getting brutally murdered. No one's being charged criminally. So to me, that's an outrage. You know, and for my sister Corinne Gaines to get brutally murdered in front of her baby could have got murdered as well, and nothing happens to the officers. They just walk out the courtroom. That is utterly ridiculous. Anthony Anderson, the list goes on. It's a disgrace.
Can you talk more about your own fight with for justice for your brother?
Yes, it's so tirelessly. I mean, I've been tirelessly fighting. It's so tiresome. Basically, for you to get, and I always call it the Doug and Pony show, because you have so many people that have power and that can do things, and they rather turn it around and play this mind game with you and say, oh, sister, I respect you so much. You're adamantly out in the street. You have the power. First of all, I don't have no power. The devil is a lie, because if I had power, killer cops would be in cell blocks. So let's be clear. So that really is tiresome. And then on another level, it really irritates me when they always try to make it seem like street violence is over here and police brutality victims are over here, when it's all together. You know, they don't want to talk about, they always want to talk about black on black crime. I don't even call it that. It's called community violence. You know, because Caucasians kill Caucasians. They don't call that Caucasian on Caucasian crime. Asians kill Asians. That's not Asian on Asian crime. Why is it black on black crime? You know, it's just utterly ridiculous. So I want to talk about blue on black crime when these officers are killing us and not being held accountable. That's what I want to talk about.
Can you tell me, Tawanda, any moments that you recall through your struggles with this where something, you know, a memory that kind of stood out in terms of like a possible turning point, in terms of getting young people more excited about being engaged or supporting the work that you're doing? Is there any moment that comes to mind?
Yes, absolutely. So when you talk about my brother, Pastor Hebert, he actually sponsored one of his schools, and they had talked about my brother, and we got to meet a lot of young kids, and it just like for them to make poems up, and then for me also to meet like college students from all over come to West Wednesday, literally just to stand like traveling. You know, I had people come from Harvard University, Howard University, Towson University. Like, it's just amazing to see those students stand out there, and then not only just the young students from Poly. Like my Uncle Bill brings students from Poly, and that's amazing to me. You know, so those are the turning points, because at the end of the day, that's the reason why we do it, for them, so that they could be safe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to bring Marion Gray Hopkins into the conversation, and one of the reasons that we feel is so important to have her here is because she's been at this for a very, very, very long time, one. And two, I think that we have to work harder to push back against the celebritization of mothers, and to understand that all of these mothers are feeling the same pain. So we have to try to bring this focus as broadly and as widely as we can. So, Marion, can you talk to us about some of the work you've been doing? I know you've worked with numerous organizations. I just want to mention some of them. The Maryland Coalition for Justice and Police Accountability, Families for Justice, the National Victims of Police and Terrorism and Accountability. Talk some to us about what keeps you in this fight after 2 decades, and do you see any bright spots in terms of us making some headway?
Let me just start. I want to start off and just say, you know, and I thank you for recognizing that there are mothers across this country that are not in the spotlight. I just left an event in Washington, D.C., where over 50 mothers from across this country gathered at the Capitol to stand in solidarity, to be united, to say enough is enough. And I just wanted to recognize a few mothers that are here from, you know, that were also here. So I wanted to recognize Corinne Gaines' mother, Rhonda Dormis, is here. I want to recognize Janet Baker, who is here from Houston, Texas.
All right.
And I'm sorry, her son was Jordan Baker.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to recognize Jackie Johnson, whose son Kendrick Johnson was killed in Georgia. I want to recognize Monty Benjamin, whose son Javis Benjamin was killed in Atlanta, Georgia. I want to recognize Bernice McFadden, whose sons were here in the Baltimore area. And when we talk about community violence, this woman had 3 sons murdered 6 weeks apart. So I wanted to recognize Bernice McFadden. And I'm not sure, I don't have my glasses on, I can't see, so I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. If I have,
you brought your posse, basically.
Absolutely, yeah, we left DC and we trucked on down here.
I see. Thank y'all for coming.
Yeah, but when you ask me, you know, what keeps me in this fight, I mean, my son was killed, his death cannot be in vain. My son was murdered for no reason. Mm-hmm. And if we sit back and allow this to happen and do nothing, then that means we're in consent with the status quo. Mm-hmm. Under no circumstances was I going to allow my son's death to be in vain when he had every right to be where he was the night that he was murdered. He had done no wrong. He was not involved in any violence, any drugs, any alcohol, any of that. And so I'm saying to myself, if my son, who is in a 2-parent household, who's a full-time college student, who's working a part-time job, who's a mentor to his peer group, if he can die, then none of us stand a chance here. Any of us are open to police terror. And I said, you know, once I finally got myself up off the floor and I got myself, to my senses, And I got involved with the People's Coalition in Prince George's County, who was there by my side through all of this. I said, I vowed to fight to the end of my death because I can't bring Gary back, but by God, if I can save someone else's child, I will do just that. And you know, we talk about being tired. It can be overwhelming, but we know that change is very slow. But what I do see that's happening in our society today, more people are stepping up. You know, when Gary was killed, they didn't have social media. We didn't have the video cameras. We didn't have that technology that allows you to see what you, well, and then in some cases, I can't even say that because sometimes the video shows it. And in Ms. Carr's case, we saw Eric Garner, and nothing changes. But again, I can't give up. I always say giving up is not an option. Amen. That I will fight to my death. And I will fight for those that are left behind because Gary was a martyr. And I know that God has chosen each of these mothers individually and independently. We all bring something unique to this table. And by God, the women are fighting and we will bring about change. I have no doubt.
I wanted to ask you another question, and that is, you know, it seems like there's so many levels that this fight takes place on. I think that you know, one, as we kind of go around the country, you have activists, some of them mobilizing for the first time. People, it's not a short learning curve; it's a long learning curve.
Absolutely.
There's so many layers to how this system works to get away with this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted you to talk about just a few of these dimensions, these loopholes. I know that you're, in the case of the officer that was indicted for your son's killing, he had chosen a judge as opposed to a jury. Mm-hmm. And I'm just kind of curious, like, this is something that we've also seen happen around the country. What do you think, or do you see any progress in terms of people being able to fight that type of a tactic?
First of all, the system is not designed for us to win. And that's what this whole mobilization and activism is about, changing the system that does not work for us. Yeah. And so when I go back and I look back then, there isn't very much change that has happened over the course of the years that I've gone through this. That police officer had every right to do a judge trial. But what we find is that you have the DA in bed, if you will, yes. You know, with the police officers, with the judge. I mean, the system, they're all interconnected. Mm-hmm. And until we have separatism there, then there will be no justice for anybody.
That's right.
And so we have to look at and continue to look at how do we have independent prosecutors, someone that's not depending upon a police officer that they work with every day to help them with another case that they may have. And it just doesn't work. It just does not work. And again, it's a system overhaul. People want to talk about training. They want to talk about, you know, a lot of different, it's not training. They're doing what they were trained to do. And if you change them and the system is still broken, yes. I don't care how much training you give them. Nothing's going to change.
That's right.
Ms. Carr, you know, I want to kind of build on what Ms. Hopkins is saying here, and that is, in terms of these loopholes and in terms of the many myriad ways that this system is working against us. You have the attorney, the district attorney, you have the police, you have the judges, you have and one of the things that you highlighted was the media. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times people don't see the media as also working in concert. Oh, I know that people did talk about that in the case of Mike Brown heavily. But in terms of your son, I remember seeing one of the interviews that you did where you talked about how the media got his story wrong. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that?
Yes. Well, I would like to just say good evening to everyone, and thank you for coming out to listen to our stories, and maybe you can build on and support us, because we do need support. Yes. You know. And I want to thank the mothers that took the time to come here. I think with most of them I have interacted with, and you know, we do try to make changes. I thank y'all for that. But far as the media, yes, to them, our children's story is just selling another newspaper. But this is our life. We live with this every day. And then they make things up. They say that the person was homeless. The person was doing this or they were doing that. And actually none of it is reality. It's fake news. But, you know, we live with that, and then we have to get up and we have to straighten them out. We get out and we tell our stories. We know our children's story. We know it better than anyone else. So that's why when we are out there, we try to encourage other mothers, but we have so many mothers, they can't get out of bed, they're on medication, they just can't deal with the situation after their son is killed. I was like that myself, but you know, I knew I had to get up out of that bed. Because if I stay in that bed, nobody would know my son's story. They would read what the news or the media wanted them to read. And I just wasn't going to lay there and let them do that. So I had to get, and I mean, I was outraged. I was angry. I was bitter. But, you know, I said, I have to channel my anger. And I had to compose my outrage so I can get up and look at the bigger picture, so I can be a voice. My son no longer has a voice, so I'm going to be his voice, and I'm going to be the voice for the voiceless, the nameless, and the faceless. A lot of us never got even a news story in the paper. Maybe they said a few lines on page 4, but they hurt. Their son, their daughter was killed. They feel the same pain. So we as mothers have to get together. We have to tell them what we know. We have to get out there and we have to fight for our children. We have to fight for our grandchildren. We have to fight for the unborn, so that we got to make it a better America for them. And I'm all with this. When there is something to do, if there is a story out there, and if I know the mother, I don't have to know the mother. I go where she is. Right. And I try to encourage her. I tell her my story. I tell her I was just like you. I come from a place like you. I come from a dark place. But we have to get together. We have to get this story out there. They're killing too many of our children. They come in our neighborhoods. They terrorize. They brutalize. They shoot us down. They choke us. And they walk away like it was just something to do. And we're not going to sit there, and we're not going to take that anymore. And I tell everyone, when you see these stories on TV, don't just say, oh, don't sympathize. Oh, another black boy got killed. No, we're not taking this. Don't just say that. Get up, see what you can do. If it's only to call your councilman, if it's only to call your congressman, if it's only to go and vote and get them out of office who's not doing anything for you.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Ms. Carr, I wanted to, I remember watching an interview that you did where you talked about the ways in which the media was saying what was happening when your son was arrested and why the police were trying to arrest him, and that the story was not told correctly. And I want you to talk about that. And I also want you, well, let's start with that. If you can just kind of correct that story, because I think that I had never heard the right story.
Okay, that day that he was murdered, the media was saying that he was resisting arrest, that he was selling loosies, and that was not true. He was not resisting arrest. And at that point, he was not selling Lucy's. He had just broken up a fight. Yeah. And that's why the police was on the scene, because there was a fight. But he had broken up the fight and had done, told the two boys who were fighting, like try to, like mediate between them, and which he did. That's when the police came up, and that's when the police started to harass him. In fact, the same two boys who were fighting, two young men, I call all my younger ones boys, but the two young men who had been fighting, they were the ones who went to Cynthia to tell her. She was the one who was the first on the scene. She was with the National Action Network of Staten Island. They went and told her, my friend just got murdered. Please come, please come. The two of them together who had just been fighting each other. And so the media never mentioned that. And this is exactly what happened on that day. He was standing up by the beauty supply, not doing anything, I guess just trying to get himself together from breaking up the two men that he knew, and he didn't want them fighting.
Okay, one of the things that I wanted to just one other thing I wanted to mention to you, Ms. Carr. We were talking earlier today, and I was telling you, and I figure I should tell the folks here about I had a meeting with there are two authors of a book. The book is called Convicted, and you probably have seen these guys because they've been all over the media. It's a police officer and the guy he arrested for selling drugs, and then the officer is found to be a corrupt officer, and I think that he basically ends up locking this guy up who did nothing. The officer is found out to be corrupt. You guys know this story? You haven't seen this? Okay, so check it out if you can. But one of the interesting things about the story is two things. One, as they go around the country talking about this story, they talk about this redemption and how the young brother who got arrested by the officer forgave him. And so it's a story about, they frame it as a story of forgiveness. But one of the things that the ex-officer talks about in the book is the level and degree of corruption at every level. The collaboration with the district attorney that allowed for him to arrest people when they know they hadn't done anything. The collaboration that allows officers to get away with lying. They know that they're lying. They know they're gonna lie, and this type of deep corruption. So when we hear about a case like, there's some corrupt officers in Baltimore, or there's some corrupt officers in New York, or there's some corrupt officers in Chicago, and a lot of times the narrative is as if it's just this one incident. This officer in great detail talks about the layers and layers and layers of corruption. So we were talking about this earlier, and I wanted to know if you wanted to add something to, just this idea of not only the corruption in terms of the officer, but also you were very outspoken about the mayor who made certain promises, and then he backed off of those promises once he got elected. Can you just talk about the ways in which elected officials are also a part of the problem?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Big part.
Yes, the elected officials, they will promise you, they will say all kind of things to get elected. But now, once they're elected, they do not stand with any of those promises. Like,
That's the truth.
The Officer Pandalea, the one who choked my son to death, the next year, he was supposed to be on modified duty in the police department, and he got $40,000 in overtime. Wow. Now, how do you do that on modified duty? And I went to the mayor and I spoke to him. I had a press conference. If he's supposed to be on modified duty, first of all, I don't think he should be on modified duty. I think he should be fired. Absolutely. I think he should be prosecuted. He should stand accountable for my son's crime, because my son did nothing that day to deserve what he got. And he promised that there, no officer who was on modified duty would make that type of money anymore. Lo and behold, the next year, the officer made even more money. So, I mean, what is this about? You murder someone and you're getting a promotion for murdering. You're getting, you know.
That's what they did.
So all you have to do is kill someone and you get a promotion.
Yeah.
This is the message that they're sending.
pays to
And
kill.
you know, we have to get those type of people out of office. That's why we can't sit back during the time when we're supposed to be out there voting. A lot of people out there would say, there's nobody to vote for. Well, the people who's in office who you're not liking what they're doing, you know, the job that they're doing, you definitely don't want them in. If you stay home, it's a possibility that's where they're going to be, right there, still making the laws. And we can't keep standing for that. We have to get out there and vote. And don't let anyone say that your vote don't count. Because if it didn't count, why would it be so many millionaires trying to restrict our vote?
Come on now, sir.
So it counts. Get out there and don't go alone. You take somebody with you to the polls.
That's right.
Miss Annie can't get out. She's in the wheelchair. Get her. Take her to the polls. Sister Sue, she's out there. You take her to the polls. Take your van, take as many as you can take to the polls, because this is important. We see what we got in office now. We can't do this again, all right? We have to galvanize, and then if you don't like any of the candidates, you go out there and you get your own candidate.
That's right.
Maybe you can run. Maybe you're the right candidate to be out there.
Did you want to add something?
No,
Looking
go
at me
ahead.
like you on the edge of your seat.
Oh, me?
Yes.
No, I mean, I was simply agreeing with her because, I mean, one of the things that's really important, because a candidate will say all the right things to get into office. And what we have to do is make sure we do our homework and investigate who's sponsoring, who's funding. Because what you will find behind the scenes, I know with a lot of the candidates, the police unions are their sponsors.
That's right. That's right.
So you need to don't listen to the talk, because talk is very, very cheap. But you want to make sure that they go into action. And because in my son's case, that happened. I was very green to the system and the political process. And so I expected the system to do what it was designed to do. So when he told me all that he was going to do, I later learned he used my family as a political pawn because he wanted that next job. He wanted to become the county executive. Praise God, he's in prison today.
Amen. That is so true, because they will use you. And I tell all the mothers who confide in me, don't be manipulated, because they use you. They use your story. They try to take your grief and they put it against you. And you are so, you know, you're in a dark place at that time. And, you know, you just sometimes just go with the flow. You don't know any better.
You trust the
You
system.
don't know anybody at the time any better.
I want to bring Samaria Rice into the conversation. Samaria, can you talk about the some of the things that have been happening with your fight for justice in Cleveland for your son, Tamir Rice?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, Baltimore. And thank you for the moms that came out. The fight is still relevant for Tamir. Tamir's case is at the Department of Justice, as many of us children cases are there. And it's just there. So that's where it's at, because you guys know who's in office. The officer, the driver of the vehicle, Officer Grandback, got a 10-day suspension, and he's back working. And the trigger man, Timothy Loman, actually got fired, but I hear that he's going through an arbitration process, and he may get his job back. The city of Cleveland has not been transparent with me. The city of Cleveland, as far as the the support from the council people or the public officials is just not there. I have some community support, the world support, the mom support, but Cleveland is, I don't know why they so quiet. I don't know. We have a lot of sellouts out there. We have quite a few organizations. They're waiting on their pension from the mayor, so they're not gonna stand up and march with you. I mean, I had one pastor told me, I said, can you do a march for my son? He said he had to check with his attorney. And this is the pastor, the chaplain of the Justice Department. So you know when people go to jail or whatever, they have a chaplain. He's the head chaplain. And I asked him, could he do a march with me? Because a lot of the people come through his program and stuff, and he has all of the men, the women, and he said he had to ask his attorney. So, I mean, I'm just out there building Tamir's legacy, basically, you know, with the support that I do have. You know, I'm not looking for them to support. I'm gonna create my own thing and give it to them. You know what I'm saying? So that's just where I'm at with that. Yes.
Samaria.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the movement within the city to remove the district attorney from position? You know, I know there was a lot of work happening in Cleveland, a lot of different organizations, as you say, some people out there trying to get their shine on, and other people really committed and trying to do some work. But in the end, you know, where were you in the process, and were you in conversation with folks in terms of voting out McGinty out of office, which was one of the highlights for many people around the country, that something could be done in the final analysis at the voting booth?
I was a little bit in the conversation, working with some of the activists, trying to have Tim McGinty do the right thing. He found it like a joke. He said that my family was strange and that we were looking for an opportunity. This is the prosecutor that told me that he was going to do what he going to do to convict the officer. So he just basically lied to my face. You know, I didn't know. But I wasn't really part of that conversation. I was pretty much out of it, but I'm glad he gone. I'm glad Tim McGinty is gone. Okay, that's his name, Timothy McGinty. He's gone. So. And also, I believe that since he didn't do the right thing in Tamir's case, a lot of people wanted him out of office. They had threatened him, if you don't do right by this mom, you're out of here. And one day I woke up, he was out of there. I'm like, wow, they didn't lie to me. And that was the activists. So I thank all the activists.
That was the mobilization and the activists.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, Samaria, you can talk some about some of the other things that happened, you know, that for, you know, most folks almost seem totally unrelated, but as a mother, you get pulled into it. For example, I remember in Cleveland when the city had decided that they were going to remove the gazebo where Tamir was shot and killed. What was your role? I know that now is in Chicago, you know, and were you involved in that process at all?
I was involved in it. I actually asked the city of Cleveland to remove it because it was a hazard to the neighborhood. Under that gazebo, all sorts of things was going on, from prostitution, from drugs to gang-related, just right there next to the school, next to the recreation center. So I asked them to remove it, and they did. I do have ownership of it. The Tamir Rice Foundation has ownership of it. We're looking for a permanent home for it right now. I just really wanted it removed from there. And when a few of the activists was like, oh, this is a history piece. This is a history piece. I'm like, well, I guess it is. I just want it gone from the park because, you know, my son was murdered right there, and I don't want no other child to get murdered like my son. And it's too much negative activity happening up under this gazebo. The community was not really happy with me, but I mean, what do they want me to do? They didn't want the gazebo to be removed, but they came around to it. The school and the park area is going to be reconstructed in 2019, and I will get a chance to put a memorial over there for Tamir. So it worked out for the best to remove the gazebo, and the community has started to come around, you know. It was just too much stuff happening under there, and if anybody's from Cleveland, Ohio, you know what I'm talking about. It was just too much. It wasn't safe. You know, it just wasn't safe. It wasn't safe.
Can you lastly just talk a little bit about your views on, a lot of times when these cases are happening, you have the activist community kind of going one way, and sometimes the family going another way, and bumping heads. And I'm just kind of curious, are there, what was that like for you?
Well, I was pretty much like out of it. I'm not even gonna lie. My cousin actually did what she did by reaching out to certain people to bring all them people up there along with some other organization. Yeah, Latanya. And I wasn't out there on the front lines at first because I was so weak. And, I have 3 other children at home. And I just woke up one day and seen all these people out. So I'm like, they out there for me? And I just sat back down like I didn't know what to do. It was phenomenal, though. Yeah. It was phenomenal, and I was overwhelmed with it. But I didn't never get a chance to be out there in the beginning with the crowds and, be a part of the protest walks and stuff like that, because I was really, really sick in the beginning. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to give Tawanda the last word, and then if we can take a question or two. Yes? If you can, Tawanda, I don't know if you want to just take it from here.
Yeah, I just want to take it from here.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, I sound a mess. I'm fighting this cold. Excuse me. But I just want to let everybody know that it's real sad when people try to use our pain for their gain. That's real. That's reality. So I said all that to say, and then to think about the media and how they play an active role in all of this. It's sad that all of our stories start the same and end the same. No justice, no peace, and they blame us. And what they do is they terrorize, they brutalize, and they dehumanize. So which is no surprise that at the end of all this, the officers get off. They act like our lives don't matter. And it's sad that the media can make innocent people look guilty and guilty people look innocent. And to know that my brother dying words was Trayvon Martin help, that will never. We all are their mothers. I'm a sister. I am my brother keeper. But we all in this struggle together, and we will win. We will never stop fighting for accountability. And right now I'm actively working with the ACLU to get this disclaimer, where so if you take a settlement for your loved one, you can't talk about it. Are you kidding me? You got to be kidding me, right?
That's right.
Because it's not about...
You tried to do that to me, but you see what I'm doing.
And you see exactly what I'm doing. I'm calling them killer cops out by their name, Chapman Ruiz, David Lewis, all of them. I'm coming for every last one of them. Because at the end, it's not about the income, it's about the outcome. It's about the outcome. We're more than hashtags and body bags. We're more than being 6 feet in the dirt and pictures and buttons on T-shirt. Our lives matter. When they put us in the dirt, they get stripes on their shirt. It got to stop, and it's going to stop now. The time is now, and we need to pull together and stick together. One fight, one purpose, one cause. Dismantle this corrupt system by all means necessary. Real talk, and that's the truth. Like, I mean that with my whole entire mind, body, and soul. We have to, because you cannot clean a filthy house with a dirty mop. I'll end on that note. Thank y'all so much.
One thing, Bakari, and the first thing I believe is racism. Racism is taught, is definitely a disease. And, it will still, surface until people start getting cured for it. And I think you could start with some counseling,
Okay, we're going to take some questions, comments. We want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to directly speak with the mothers since they're here.
Good evening, everybody, and blessings to everybody as well. But with what was said, I believe a thing that'll help the future will literally be in the house, people teaching their youngsters to do things differently, because those youngsters are going to be the one, and I'm not saying directly that youngster, but the youngsters are going to be the one to eventually get into politics, get into policing. So we got to start from the low age. And hopefully, I pray to God that will start the change for the future. But my blessings.
Thank you.
I want to make a comment to that. If you look today, and if you look, they're getting younger and younger. I mean, I look back, and we did the march on Washington, and that 11-year-old girl, God, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, that got up and how powerful she was. I can't vote today, but I will in 7 years. And so I think you are exactly right. You're on point. We need to teach our children now, because I'm old, and I know, I'm going to have to pass the baton very, very quickly. But I think the movement is here. I mean, when we're out there and we're mobilizing, we're organizing, they're getting younger and younger. They get it. And they are going to refuse what's happening today. They're doing what they need to do so that they don't experience this in the future. So I think we are teaching them up and bringing them up the way they need to in order to make this go away.
Good evening. I have a question for the mamas. If radical change was to be realized, and tomorrow you were asked to redesign our justice system in any way that you could, what would be the one thing that you would do to make major change so that no more babies are killed in our streets? What would you do?
The one thing I would do is the whole thing with America is we need to really just get rid of the guns. The people do not know how to be. They're not responsible enough, and the NRA is not even standing up for the ones that even got the so-called license. So I just think America needs to throw away all of the guns, abolish the guns from America, and that's just how I feel.
One of the things I think that we are working on, community policing. Yeah. We've gotten away from that. I think when the officers work, deal, and know the people in the community that they serve and build relationships, that's going to bring a significant change. So the community policing is, I think, one of the number one things.
Also, with that, Marian, the police need to have 50 hours of community training and not 50 hours of firearm training. If anyone didn't know. It's 50 hours of firearm training, 10 hours worth of community training. So that should speak for itself. Like, why do you need 50 hours of community training? I know you're trying to be trained like you're supposed to be shot right here in the chest, as I was on a previous panel with the talk out in LA. And one thing that the detective said is that we have the highest power. We got the highest power than the president, because we can kill and we get away with it. So this is what the detective is saying on the documentary of the talk. So absolutely, police definitely need more community training if they have to be a police officer, and they definitely don't need to be shooting to kill. What's wrong with the arm or the leg? You know what I'm saying? My child would still be alive if they would have shot him in his arm and leg. Everybody's child will probably still be alive. They got shot, if they got shot in the arm or leg.
That's true.
And I know she asked for one, because I could give you a whole list of them. A whole list of them. So, yeah.
And I wanted
one
to
of
say,
the things.
Can I jump in real fast?
Yes,
I
please.
want to say they need to start drug testing these officers.
Absolutely. That's
if
on my
they
list.
drug test the
That's on my
dead,
list.
drug test these maniacs that's killing us. That's
on
what
my
they
list.
need to do.
Yeah, and I would take away that protection from the police. They have a 50A law or a police Bill of Rights.
Law and enforcement, yes.
So we need to adjust that. We need to. They should be judged by the same laws that we are judged
Absolutely.
by.
Absolutely.
They kill someone, they should have to take a drug and alcohol test.
Right away.
There should be the same laws that govern us should govern them, and that's the first thing that I would do.
So the question that I had is actually the point that you made. A lot of people aren't aware that the police are protected through this officer's Bill of Rights. Right. And so when we ask the question, how come nothing ever happens to police, they are protected and immune to the laws that apply to us, and that gives them carte blanche to do the things that they do. So what can we as a community do to dismantle those officers' Bill of Rights so that when they do things to break the law and take lives of our sons, our daughters, etc., how can we as a community hold them accountable?
Just to talk about this law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights, because this is something that is near and dear to me. I've been working on for many, many, many years. And just to give one example of the law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights and the right that they have. In the state of Maryland, an officer has 10 days before he can even be questioned. 10 days. We fought, every year. We're down in Annapolis, and we're saying, why should they have 10 days? When my son was killed, everybody that they thought was a witness was taken down and didn't know their rights and had to give a statement. Those statements were given to the officer who had 10 days to write his statement. So, we said trust. But you don't trust someone that you're giving statements and then you build your statement around their statement. Come on, let's keep it real here.
Yes.
And we fought just last year, and they said, pat yourself on the back. The success was small, but you have to celebrate the small successes.
That's right.
There is no success. When you jump from 10 days to 5 days, you still
Same
got 5
thing.
days. We want 0 days. Why should you have
Zero
anything
tolerance.
I do want to say one thing. I believe even Marion or Gwen said this. Making sure you know who your officials is, your local officials, public officials. You have the right to investigate the judge, the prosecutor, the councilman. I know during my fight still for Tamir, I went up in the council office and I said, look, this is your colleague, Timothy Loman. And I said, if he keep his job, that means you won't have a job. So I told the president of the councilman that, and the next week, Timothy Loman was fired because I don't know if he went in there and advocated or whatever, if he was scared, but I went up in his office and President Kelly, if you're listening, he remember, I told him if Timothy Loman was not fired, well, I really wanted both of them to be fired, but I said if the trigger man is not fired, you won't have a job because this is your colleague at the end of the day, and he's protecting you at the end of the day. So I went up there and basically just threatened them.
Yeah, these are the things that you have to do. Like in New York, me and other New York mothers, we went up to Albany, which is our capital, to speak with not the mayor, the Governor Cuomo. So now, at first, we couldn't get to talk to him. We had a press conference. We brought our makeshift coffins and sat them in front of his door. We demanded to have a conference because we wanted an executive order for a special prosecutor. And what that does is when these senseless killings take place that kills our sons and daughters, it takes it out of the hands of the local DA and puts it in the hands of the state's attorney general. This is not law, but it's a Band-Aid until we get law. Last year, we got it out of the assembly, but we didn't get it out of the Senate. We're going back again. We're going again and again until we get this law.
You have to continue to fight.
more question.
Let's take one more question and then have Erica come up and talk about our discussions.
My name is Henry Jones. I graduated from the University of Baltimore's Criminal Justice Program in 1993.
We can't hear her.
I worked with juveniles
Is the microphone
for
on?
10 years.
Okay.
Charles Hickey School dealing with kids that kill people. You're really listening to somebody that's out of the war zone. I'm 54 years old. I've been shot at. I've carried guns. I know guys who have killed people. They're in jail right now. I live down the street from the jail, which is right around the corner. There's 6,500 guys in there right now. I've been in there before. It's not a great place. And it's real tough to sit here and talk to you guys about something and really try to make sense for somebody. So I was sitting here thinking, you know, what can I really say to this group? I mean, everything y'all are saying is beautiful. But the fact of the matter is, I could get shot tonight. I've been living with that for 50-some years. Coming out of Cherry Hill, Lorraine Avenue off of Greenmount, where at 6 years old, the Army National Guard took me to get in the house. So these things that these cats over here pull on the west side, it's not really fazing nobody. I'm trying to give y'all some nervous energy from the war zone, where the shots are still being fired.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And outside where I live at, the roses are still there and the balloons from one of the recent casualties. A lot of people don't have to go home to neighborhoods like this.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
My mother, who's no longer here, my father, they moved to the county. Well, my father didn't. He didn't make it out of Park Heights. My mother lived in Anne Arundel. My stepfather, who we grew up around Morgan, is still there as a survivor himself because some people tried some stuff on us up there. And I've been on the deathbed. I got hit on the corner by two guys that was trying to take over our corner and sell drugs there. I wasn't going for it. They almost killed me. And I'm going back to the 80s. The war zone is here. That's our reality.
That's true.
Who we sign up with and contract with has made a difference in my life. If people ask, well, how did you survive? And a lot of nights I've been lucky. Where bullets come flying out, you know, and you're lucky. But I would say more than luck is training and education. A lot of the young guys I grew up with, they listen to me. Mainly because they have worked with me in some of these catastrophic zones. You know, growing up in Greenmount, where a lot of the traffic is, I know a lot of these guys. And you're really fighting a war that a lot of people don't see no end to because of the conditions of the neighborhoods.
Thank you.
There are some neighborhoods in Baltimore, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful day every day. And you have your borders up and your troops positioned not to have certain people come in those neighborhoods. That's what's working. It's real clear where people can go and create a problem. Roland Park, way up in Northwest in certain neighborhoods, Morgan, they really don't, certain neighborhoods just really don't have the volatility of problems, and people know that. So there's trouble zones that we've studied to say, this is a problem zone. So you better not get out that card because people are doing things that violence come along with it. And I think one of the things that has helped people over time is the fact that you do have a lot of special programs for kids that work. You know, the safe haven zones. When those zones are promoted and get down to the street to stay out, guys try to conform. And that's been the walk for the last 20 years, trying to conform to all these different programs. And that's why you see some of the guys walking like this down the street because they don't want to step in certain boundaries because they know it's going to be a problem. But I think the problem we have right now is we have restricted a lot of people's movement to the point I can't go nowhere. And they're in post-traumatic shock, and it's like, really don't know what to do. So there's a fear element on the street. I just walked down Greenmount the other day from where Memorial Stadium used to be. Straight from 30th to Greenmount all the way back down to here. Nobody touched me.
Brother.
Okay, so
you gotta
I could talk all night.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, though. Thank you for your
Thank
comment.
you.
So,
Delegate Brooke Learman here.
okay.
Hi, my name is Brooke Learman, and I'm a state delegate here in Baltimore City, serving my first term in office. And I just want to say how much I appreciate you encouraging people to get out to vote and to hold their elected officials accountable. I also want you to know that your stories have moved people like me and have changed me. You know, I'm not afraid to say that I grew up in a privileged household and didn't understand a lot of what was going on in the world. And from hearing stories and learning about and reading about the horrific things that have happened to your sons and your loved ones, it's changed who I am and the battles that I'm willing to wage and the things that I want to change in society. I have a son, and I can't imagine, you know, it's hard for me to imagine how difficult it's been for you. So I just want to say that, you know, what you're doing isn't in vain, and there are people like me all over the country. I'm not perfect, but I'm doing the best that I can, and I think about your sons and your families and your struggles a lot, and I want you to keep doing what you're doing. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I think you got an actual question?
Okay,
Right.
Can I make a comment to what she just said? Okay, I want to make a comment to that because I think this audience here today gets it. But the important thing that the ask and the takeaway for everyone in here is to bring somebody to the table who may not be where you are, because that's what it's going to take to change, to move this movement forward, is to bring along some other folks and mobilize. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I would like to ask the mothers who have come here and shared the power of your stories to share how do you feel about this? The importance of us, particularly as African black folk, not waiting until it's somebody in our family to be abused and taken down. That I teach a social justice theater program right here in Baltimore City. And I share with my babies, the young brothers, sagging and dragging, out of pain, trying to front with that hostility. And I call them my sons, and they push back on you. I'm not your son, you better get up out my face. But after about 3 months of me calling their son, they say, you all right, Mr. Tingale. But they need love. Share the importance of us, African black folk, wonderful white allies and co-conspirators, the importance of looking at each child, particularly African black children. And let's not forget our young black girls who have pain and trauma as well. Let's not wait till one of our family members, our cousin, or our own children are taken down before we realize the importance of creating a system, taking down laws, dismantling a system that perpetuates them being hunted and stalked and not even viewed as human beings. Black African bodies aren't even viewed as being human. And the importance of us doing it now before one of our personal loved ones look at all our kinfolk, not just our blood folk.
Wow. All right. Okay. Do we have one salient response that's going to shut us down? That's what I want to hear. Do we have one from the panel?
I mean, I guess we all speak the same, and I've heard this here today. The one thing that we talk about, and we go out and we go across the country, is, you know, teach one, you know, bring one, teach one. Yeah. So, I mean, we talk about, and that's what I meant. When you have to go out and teach someone else, and we as black folks, we have to do that, because again, I will tell you that no one in this room wants to be in any of these shoes here. And so that's what we speak to. You don't want to be in these shoes, so it's important for us who have experienced it to continue to share that you don't want to be in these shoes, and these are the things that you can do if you don't want to walk in these shoes.
And I also think that investing in your children, making sure that, you know, you bringing them up the right way, as I was doing with my children, Yeah, you know, of course, but at the end of the day, it's the government. They want to try to say that it's our fault and this and that. Right. It's the government's fault. They should be better at what they doing if they gotta be cops in America. You know what I'm saying? And it do start at home. It do start at home. It start with the education, the teaching, and just, investing in your children. I do believe that, and it starts in our own community as well, too. We want our communities to be better, but we have to start taking care of our own communities and not waiting for nobody else to come around to do it, and making sure that some of these council people is on board with what we doing in our communities. As I see in Cleveland, Ohio, the council people not supporting the community, and it's sad, and that's why it feel, with a young brother, it feel like the community has no hope. Especially coming from the black and brown neighborhood, we feel like there's no hope. So,
and it's such a shame that us as black people have to have a different conversation with our children, with our sons, than the white community. Because we should have the same conversation, but we have to try to teach our boys and our girls how to stay alive in case the police stops them. We want them to walk away from that stop, and that is so important. So we try to tell them how to conduct themselves in the event that they are stopped. And it's just a shame we have to do it like that.
Okay, we're gonna turn it over to Baltimore Ceasefire.
Okay.
I think we got to. They have another session that they're going to go into, so we need to give them the floor. Thank you all for your attention, and thanks to the mothers. Turn it over, and she's going to give you your instructions. Thank you, Eric.
Hi, everybody, again. So we're going to go into breakout tables to have conversations, to think deeply about what you heard these moms and this sister talk about, how it impacts the work that you are doing in Baltimore around violence, community and police violence. And if you're not involved in something, what does this say to you about what you could be doing to help with violence happening in the city? One other thing we want to think about is the healing that is involved when you're doing this kind of work. So I just want to check in with the moms and Tawanda before we break out. If you can just talk some about, so you talked about first being paralyzed and not being able to get up out of the bed, and then whatever the thing was that made you realize, that made you like, I gotta get up. But we know that it's a journey and that the pain doesn't just like go away. And so you're in the pain of losing your loved one, right, and still fighting for justice. And so what does that healing look like for you all? What helps keep you being able to still fight in the midst of dealing with that trauma?
I'll start. I'm the talker. Can y'all tell?
Yes. Please.
Okay, so healing. What it looks like for me is I get my healing through my interactions with other mothers. They all call me the mother of the mothers, right? But they just don't know, as I'm helping to heal them, it's healing me. And I think, and my strong faith in God, I'm not a religious, churchy person, but I'm a godly person. And I know that only through him that I was able to stand. I think, I don't know if I mentioned it, I may have shared this story early, but 16 days before my son was murdered, my husband died of a very short stint with cancer. And people look at me and it's like 16 days, like, how do you do it? And I said, but God. And so through the healing process, and I learned this because one of the things that, and it's odd, it's strange, when my husband was being taken down on his deathbed, he took the mask off. He said, you know you're my soldier, right? You know you're the strongest person that I know, right? And he did a thumbs up. My son, before he left that day to go to that event, he told me, Mom, you're such a soldier. You're one of the strongest women that I know. That keeps me going because I say because of them and what they think I am, I have to be who they think I am. And that helps me to heal. I continue the fight because of that.
Thank you.
Wow. Yes, even with myself, if it wasn't for God, let me keep my mind and let me just stand strong, I don't know where I would be, because I thought I was losing my mind when I lost my son. But the Lord spoke to me and told me, get up out of that bed. Says, you going to lay there and die like your son, or are you going to get up and hold his name up and let people know who he was or who he is? So I decided to turn my mourning into a movement and my sorrow into a strategy. So because without me, being that he is no longer here, I have to speak for him. He speaks through me. So, you know, there was no option. I had to get up, and now I'm out here, and this is my life work. And it's too late for my son, but I'm going to try my best to save your son, your nephew, your niece, whoever it is, because we don't want another body. We do not want another mother in this club.
Yeah.
The membership is too expensive.
Yes.
You can't afford it.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, for me, I am blessed by the best and highly favored by the most almighty. And my healing, you know, my son was 12 years old. I had a lot of nurturing to do, and a lot of loving to still give them. And I have 3 children at home. I just thank God for them other 3 kids at home to keep me going, because, you know, I could have easily lost my mind. You know, I could have easily lost my mind. And I just know that there's a God, and I just know that other people was, you know, suffering the same thing like me. So that's what kind of how my healing started. Like, I wasn't alone. I had the 3 other kids, and I'm walking through the grace of God, because it's not easy. It's
right.
really not easy.
That's right.
Thank you.
That's you so right.
Thank you.
And I just remember when my brother was killed, and my whole family thought I was losing my mind, when God actually let me feel my brother was getting beat to death at exactly the time he was murdered. I was feeling pain in my body. And I started calling all around, making all these calls. But I just remember that pain was so real, it made me, like, I was mad at God. I'm not even going to lie. I ain't even hear nothing about God or nothing. But then the God inside of me said, had it not been for me, you didn't get that call. Your family wasn't good enough to get a call and say, hey, we just killed your loved one. We didn't get to visit him at the hospital. We saw him 5 days after they hit his body and did all type of things to him. But I said all this to say, God told me then when I got up off that floor, get up. And that's when a beast inside of me arise. And that's who I am right now. I am my brother's keeper. Free Keith Davis Jr. and everybody.
So I want to thank y'all so much. Oh, my goodness. Okay. So that I want us to be thinking about that, too, as we're having conversations. So we're going to have, if you're a facilitator with the Baltimore Ceasefire Team, please raise your hand if you're going to be. So maybe if we can have, like, if you all can go, like, to the back of the room, or go sit at a table. Ooh, sit at a table. I'm trying to figure out the best way to, like, divvy people up, right? So facilitators sit at a table, and once a table is full, go to another table, right? So they'll have questions to help facilitate conversation. But it is really focused around what do we need in our own healing processes as we are facing violence and working on violence every day, and how can we take the things that we've heard these sisters pour their heart and their soul and their journeys and just shared a piece of their journeys with us. This is not something that's easy to do. Although these are stories that they tell all the time, this is their life. And they have to relive it when they retell the story again. And so what that takes is we need to take that and honor it and let it impact our journeys, because they've shared their journeys with us. So we're going to talk deeply about how is their journey, how we going to make sure that it impacts our journey while we're doing this work in Baltimore. That's a good question. Evan, how long do we have?
At least 20, 25 minutes.
Okay.
Thank y'all for having us.
Yes, thank y'all so much.
Thank everyone for coming.
Okay. I went when I came in here. I was like, Lord, I've been out there on that long.
So I will.
Okay. All right.